Greetings, music nerds, and welcome to Season 6 of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. I am your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hen House Studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm really excited to be bringing you this new season of shows coming to you on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. I have a great lineup of fascinating conversations with incredible musicians, songwriters, guitarists, steel guitarists, drummers, composers, who knows what else. I've been having an incredible time diving deep with these folks, and I know you're going to enjoy listening. Just a reminder that this year I've taken out the short song samples through the show, as things have gotten way more complicated as far as legal use of music goes, so I'll be making an accompanying Spotify playlist to each episode, which you'll find in the episode's show notes and at the website at makersandshakerspodcast.com. So anytime you hear this cute little slide guitar sound, you'll know there's a track to go along with it on the playlist. We have some new sponsors this year, but continue to be largely listener supported. Your help in keeping the show going is always appreciated, and you can do it with a one-time donation or a Patreon subscription. Patreon is a monthly payment of your choice, and when you sign up for that, you get a bit of added content as well as an ad-free version of the show to listen to. If you don't feel like kicking in any dough, that's cool too, but you can help by subscribing for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just spread the word by sharing the show, following us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and telling all your pals about it. You can get links to all this stuff, of course, at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Meanwhile, many thanks to our sponsors this season. Please check them out and let them know that I sent you. They are Isotope, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, and Spectra 1964. Howdy folks and music nerds, welcome back to Season 6 of the show. This is episode number 130. Woo, that's quite a few. Today on the show, my guest is a killer guitar player and songwriter, known for his work with his band Cry of Love and being a side person to the Black Crowes, the Dixie Chicks, Sheryl Crow, Joe Perry, lots of others. His name is Audley Freed. Hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm just getting ready to head out to Vancouver for a few weeks. I'll be doing 4 shows out there, a bunch of rehearsing, shooting some video stuff, and doing some recording and mixing. Should be a hoot. And good to get back to the old stomping grounds once in a while. So I guess there's a bit of news with the show. I guess what I'm doing is admitting defeat with the whole concept of how I'm dealing with not being able to put music in these shows like I used to up until this season. I've been doing this little slidey sound effect to alert you during this season that there's a song on the Spotify playlist that corresponds to what is being talked about. And, it just seems like I cannot win with you guys. I just have received a good chunk of negative feedback about this. And I'm just trying to make it interesting. And it seems like the complaints are overwhelmingly more than the positive feedback. In fact, literally no good feedback at all. Just people that have actually taken the time to go out of their way to tell me that the 1.5-second sound effect on the show to tell them to go and listen to the playlist bugs them. Since all I hear is bad things, I'm going to stop it immediately. So you won't hear the sound anymore through this episode, starting now. I'm still doing playlists for each episode, and you can find the links to those in the show notes and at the Music Makers and Soul Shakers website. And, it just seems like I can't win on this one. I can't put actual music in the show anymore. I'm not legally allowed to. Apple and Spotify have both threatened to take the show down if I do that again. And so that's done. And now I'm actually having to go back and remove music from old episodes as they get flagged. And it's a bit of a nightmare, and I don't really want to get into it. And I thought the little sound effect was a good solution, but I guess not. So please do check out the playlist in this week's show notes or the link on the podcast website. And, feel free to send a positive or encouraging note if you feel so inclined. That might be kind of nice to have some to offset all the negative comments. Thanks, folks. So just a reminder also that the Hen House Hang that you've been hearing about throughout the season now has some 2023 dates. And it is a little early, but we are booking spots if you're interested in that. The dates are now going to be September 25 to 28, which is final now. And that's right after the Americana Fest here in Nashville. It's going to be a blast. Hope some of you might want to come and be a part of it in 2023 to learn about recording and hang out with some like-minded folks. It's going to be fun. So please have a look at that at stevedawson.ca. All right. What a treat to have Audley Freed here this week. I met Audley on stage, as a matter of fact. We were both sitting in with our pal Alvin Youngblood Hart over at the Old Family Wash here in East Nashville a few years back, and that was a lot of fun. And I've run into him a few times over the years, and lately we were COVID bros, because we both likely got it at the same show. It was a Los Lobos show here in East Nashville at the Basement East. We both apparently got COVID at that show. Woo! That's cool. That's a good bonding moment, I guess. In any case, Audley is a master of groove and tone, and his undeniably cool approach to playing rock and roll guitar has landed him gigs with the Black Crowes. He's played with Jimmy Page, Joe Perry, the Dixie Chicks, Chris Robinson, and lots more. He started out in North Carolina playing in cover bands, and eventually started a somewhat legendary band in the 90s that was certainly on my radar as a youngster. They were called Cry of Love. They had some hits back in the day and some success, but as you'll hear, he kind of burnt out on that after a while, and that allowed him the time to become a side person. And he's been steadily working at that ever since. He's really never gone back to playing his own music that much in bands, although he does occasionally. But he's basically been a constantly working side person ever since. And he's a great, relaxed dude to hang and talk with, and had some great insight into how to get cool gigs, keep the cool gigs, show up prepared for the cool gigs. And, you know, it's been an ethos that's seen him through decades in this crazy industry, and likely will for many more. So Audley does not, to my knowledge, have a website. I did search around and couldn't find one, or much presence on the old socials, but you can see him these days wherever Sheryl Crow is playing. He's in her band, of course, and I highly recommend catching her and her band if you can. They're killer. And one last thing before we get going here, I'd just like to shout out to somebody who made a donation, and I can't remember if they signed up to Patreon or not, a couple weeks back, Simon Renton. So thank you. I couldn't do it without you. Also, just a quick reminder that we will be giving away a really cool Union Tube and Transistor C-Verb reverb pedal at the end of this season to a random Patreon subscriber. So as long as you subscribe before the end of season 6, you'll be enrolled in that groovy little giveaway. And thanks to Union Tube and Transistor for supplying the pedal to give away. All right, let's get down to it. Enjoy my conversation with Audley Freed. Are things back in full swing as far as like the Sheryl gig goes and local stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, the Sheryl stuff has been busy. We had a busy summer.
Yeah, it seemed like it.
That is, you know, I would say as far as the definition of quote unquote full swing, I would say that's in full, you know, had gotten back into full swing.
I had Fred on the show recently,
right on.
And he was saying that you guys had sort of dodged bullets with, like, there was no big COVID emergencies and nobody got sent home or anything like that.
I missed some shows this year.
We got COVID at the same show. We both got COVID at Los Lobos,
Los Lobos, yeah. I think I did. I'd actually gone over to the Nelson Drum Shop to see Adam Levy and Rich Hinman play earlier that night, and I know some people there that got it.
Oh.
But I can't imagine there was only the
Lobo show was pretty packed.
I've been really, really careful for, you know, however long.
Yeah.
And that had to have been where it happened. But yeah, I ended up missing some stuff, which was merciful to me, not because I had gone past the 5 days, but I just felt terrible. You know, I was supposed to go do a gig in New Orleans at Jazz Fest.
Oh, shit.
And
with Sheryl or with somebody else?
This Last Waltz thing.
Oh, okay.
And Warren Haynes was going to do it. He broke his shoulder earlier in the year and thought he was going to be ready to do it.
Fell or something, right?
Yeah. I was going to go down and sub for him and had to miss that.
Shit.
And missed some TV stuff. And but you know, what do you say, la vie, man?
Yeah,
what
man.
are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nobody died. Nobody lost a limb.
So what happens when you've had this Sheryl Crow gig for what, 10 years maybe?
Something like that.
So say 10 years or whatever. Yeah. It's like a solid gig for you. What happens when you miss a show? Like do you have to find a sub? I know like small gigs, that's how it works. But does it work with like that too?
There's just moving parts and different people do different things. And this summer, you know, we've been a man down because of a family illness. So I shift over to some other stuff, and then we brought another guy in to sub, but not specifically sub because the parts get divvied out differently. You know, we just do. Figure it out, basically, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, we never had everybody's going home in the middle of dates or anything.
Like Sheryl Crow getting COVID would have.
If we
done
were in the
that,
middle of a bunch of shows, yeah,
Yeah.
we would. Or anybody in the band. I don't know. It seems to me like that's what people isn't that what people were doing? Like if somebody got
Yeah.
it, they just kind of were like, somebody in the camp has COVID, we have to shut the
Yeah,
thing down.
it was happening. Like I was out in April with my little band, and it was just like everyone we met was like on their toes, just terrified of not of getting COVID particularly, because it's not even that scary anymore, but like just having to shit can the whole tour.
Yeah, it's a lot, man.
It's a huge.
It's a lot, and
That
that's
would have like ruined me personally, like for my little crew and all our travel plans and stuff. It would be devastating, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having that cloud sort of follow you around, even if nobody does get sick, is a little bit exhausting, I'm sure, especially when you're in charge, because it's exhausting enough just to go out and play.
I know, right?
So
Yeah.
and that was 2 years after the
Yeah.
fact, you know. So I hope that we're going to, I hope it's going to continue to sort of, become more and more minimal, I guess, is the
Yeah.
best way. But
Yeah.
who knows, right?
So we'll talk about this gig a bit more as we go. But here's something that I noticed about your career, and I'm sure you've noticed this as well. But I wondered if this is something that you've like ever really picked up on, and maybe we could talk about it. Is that you've come into like some amazing gigs at the stage where the artist has just finished a record. So I noticed that with like, you did that with Joe Perry, you did that with the Dixie Chicks, you did that with Black Crows, you did that with somebody else too.
Could be.
Have you ever
We did a Jacob Dylan tour
Uh-huh.
on a record that he made.
that you didn't?
No, it was just him.
So I mean, it's no reflection on anything. I just find it interesting in some way that has happened to you a number of times. The timing has worked out such that you're not playing on the record. I mean, it's often, I think it's led to you playing on the next record or whatever, but you seem to be the guy that people pick up when something happens or someone leaves the band or something like that.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I never really put that sort of into a narrative, the Crows thing, they needed a lead guitar player, regardless of the record or not. I mean, quite frankly, I think they had been inching towards. I think that some of the guys in the band had participated minimally in a couple of recordings before that.
Okay.
So they made that record, that By Your Side record, without a lead guitar player.
Really?
So yeah.
Okay.
So they just needed to fill the position.
Yeah.
Going forward.
So Mark Ford left when? Like in...
I'm not really sure, but he's not on that record, and nobody took his place.
Oh, okay. So he's the last like full-time guitarist for the band until you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to think of in the Chicks world.
In the Dixie Chicks, it seems like you came in again like right after they made
a record, and the Larry Knechtel, the keyboard player, who look him up.
Yeah.
The mind-blowing, rest in peace, Larry. Awesome, Larry Knechtel. We could have a whole nother podcast discussion, a whole nother episode just talking about him. Had played on the record, and Sebastian Steinberg, the bass player, had played on the record, and the rest of the guys were put together just to go and tour.
Was Dave Grissom in the band?
Grissom was the band leader.
He was the MD.
Yes, he was the MD, and that's one of the big reasons that I took the gig.
Okay. Did you know him before that?
A little bit, and I was a big fan of his. And we had some discussions and hung out a little bit. And he was the band leader. Yeah. And so
let's talk about that for a second.
Okay,
so
sure.
That's Dixie Chicks. I probably have the year written down here somewhere, like 04, 05, like
that
04.
was like oh man, dude, it was 06.
06. Okay. Yeah. So you go into this band that's massive at that point. I'm guessing like you're playing stadiums and stuff.
Arenas, and remember, this is the tour after they had all that brouhaha with the country radio thing. This is like
was that still playing out, or was that kind of like quiet?
I think it's probably still is now.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, well, it was their first time, back in the public eye with a new record and shows since all that happened.
Okay, so let's talk about that whole thing of like coming into a situation of that scale where there is a musical director and I don't know if you thought of yourself as like the second guitar player. I don't know what the rules were.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
So Grissom was like the main guitar player and you were the rhythm player, or
I mean, Right. In the first conversation I had with him, he was like, we'll get you some solos. He was definitely not domineering or lording over.
Okay.
I mean, their music is not really sort of geared toward that kind of thing.
So were you having to learn specific parts, or did he just kind of say like,
we talked about it. We talked about it, and I ended up, like really boning up on my mandolin chops, because there were several songs that I played mandolin on.
Yeah.
And, if there was a 12-string acoustic, I would play that. Mm-hmm. I can't remember how we divvied up a lot of the other stuff, but he had done the tour before.
Okay.
And so, he kind of had a sort of regimen, however you would want to put it.
He knew what they wanted, at least,
he
what
already
they liked.
And he already was like, well, I'm playing these parts on these songs because this, I did this last time, which only makes sense. So I filled in the blanks, I would say, yeah.
Does a big touring act like that, I know it's different for each act, but like in that case, of the Dixie Chicks, did they rehearse a lot for those?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. We rehearsed and rehearsed.
Like
and
how much?
Rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed.
Okay.
I can't remember, it was a long time ago, but we rehearsed in Austin, and I think we might have gone back to Austin and rehearsed some more, and then we did, I think, a week of pre-production rehearsals at the Forum in L.A.
Oh, wow.
Which we never played there, but...
Oh, they just rented it out to rehearse?
I guess they just rented it out.
Holy
Like,
shit.
go have band practice.
Wow.
So, yes, there was no shortage of that.
Structured? Like, were you kind of like, oh my God, another fucking rehearsal? Or was it pretty, like, what was the process like?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And so...
How big was the band?
It was big. Let's see, David and I, and Sebastian on bass, Fred was on drums, Larry Knechtel. Keith,
Fred was in the band?
Yeah, Keith Sewell. That's where I first met him.
Okay.
Keith Sewell on amazing acoustic guitar, and and Pete Finney on steel guitar.
Oh,
so
nice.
That's a lot. I didn't even count however many people that is, plus the 3 girls.
Right. So 10 plus.
Yeah, so you're using in-ear monitors.
Yeah. Was that new to you? I'm guessing you didn't do that with the Black Crowes, did you?
No, that was new to me. I think that maybe that was the first time I'm trying to think.
I'd imagine that's like when you're playing shows that size, it's probably way better using in-ears.
Yeah, and if you're playing a lot of acoustic guitar,
right,
and stuff, you're not hearing all that clunk coming through the monitor. For electric guitar, I prefer to just have a wedge.
Yeah, but you couldn't do that on this tour.
Couldn't do that on this tour.
So were you putting amps like below the stage?
Amps were in a box below the stage. Now they were real.
Right.
I mean, these days
a lot of people are using Kempers or whatever. Yeah.
So there was all that, and so there's a lot of moving parts, and so just when you're talking about a production, and that's what that is, just the idea of, okay, how are we going to pull off these guitar changes, or how are the girls going to, we're going to go from banjo to dobro on this song, just rehearsing that stuff.
Right.
So there's not dead air, because it's an entertainment. It's not the Grateful Dead.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So just that logistically requires a lot of time.
Like almost choreography, really.
Yeah, without the
dance moves.
the moves. Yeah. So
but there was a lot of stage direction in the sense of like, get from here to there quickly, get this guitar.
Yeah. And if you say stage direction, as far as like to get the next, to have the instrument that you need to keep the thing rolling. Yeah, that was the stage direction. I mean.
And was that somebody's job to sort all that shit out?
No.
Okay.
No, they just, the text, we figured all that out, As far as stage direction, like you stand here and you do this and wear these clip notes, none of that.
All right. That's good.
I'm not sure that I would really do well in a situation like that. But so that, coupled with the fact that you got 2 different monitor engineers, you got a band engineer, and then you have the engineer for the girls.
Oh, so on separate
consoles.
Like entirely separate consoles. Wow.
And scenes and all that, So yeah, there was a lot of things to sort through.
Yeah. And like musically enjoyable.
Yeah, and it was a really great learning experience. Like I said, I had to really bone up on my mandolin chops
Right. That's kind of nice to
which is a bit of a, I hate to even use the word chops, but it was but I was able to learn some things, and figure out some voicings and things that I had not really explored because I'm very, very minimal mandolin player.
Yeah.
But so that was that. But man, really, honestly, that band, the guys in the band were all so good.
Yeah.
Just to be around Larry, even just to be around him, but to be able to hang with David and play with him and Sebastian and Forever, amazing rhythm section. Pete sounded great.
How much did you and David have to like orchestrate your parts together as far as two guitars goes?
Nothing really. Yeah. I mean, it was really there wasn't much on the fly. They were really good about getting us the information ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of shedding before we ever did the first rehearsal, like a lot. And we got the music we had plenty of time. And there was no YouTube at that point, but we did have some live DVDs. So I kind of sussed out what David was playing already.
Were you replacing someone, or were you just adding to the...
I can't really remember.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I don't know. Okay. If anybody played electric guitar before that, another guitar. But they had made this record with Rick Rubin.
Oh, that was that record.
That was a bit more like some 12-string electric and some 12-string acoustic. It was a bit more...
Did Grissom play on that record?
No.
Okay.
Dare I say Heartbreakers ish.
Yeah.
If without sounding like that. But I think it had been probably influenced by that sort of method, instrumentation wise, and stuff. I mean, Campbell played on the record, and Benmont. Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if Benmont did or not, but
probably he did.
If he didn't, I mean, I know he had recommended Larry Neville. Okay. So and Sebastian, these guys are just operating at a super high level, not just technically. The intentions of the performances are. You know exactly what I'm saying.
Yep.
Man. People are operating at a level that's you're not guaranteed to get that in school. Yep. So that was one of that was probably the takeaway for me as far as the really great thing about it.
Yeah. Strictly from like a practical side. When you get a gig like that, what's the understanding as far as like your time commitment in the early stage? Like when they say, okay, you've got the gig, what are you expected to do as far as like blocking off your calendar? Where does that end? Or you're just like fully committed 100%?
I'm sure they're all different.
Mm-hmm. In this case, though.
In that case, it was, we need you for this year.
Okay.
So that's how that worked.
Yeah, and there was just no discussion. It was just like we need the calendar cleared the entire year.
Yeah, and they'll and you will be paid not in increments based on week to week or day to day or when we're off or half pay or any of that stuff. It was just like, here's the figure.
Yeah, you're covered for the year, and then was that it? You were there. You were in the band for a year, pretty much?
Then we were
interesting.
They had actually booked some dates to go out the next year, and then they canned all of them.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk early. Let's go way back. So you're from North Carolina.
I'm from North Carolina. Yeah.
What part of North Carolina?
Much. I'm from down. My mom's family is from down near the coast. I'm from a little town called Burgaw, which is about. If anybody is familiar with that area, they will be familiar with Wilmington, which is the Cape Fear area, and which is about. If you're not familiar with that, then let's just say that's about 2 hours north of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and it's about 3 hours south of Raleigh.
On the coast.
But it's on the coast, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I lived about 25 miles inland.
Okay.
And my mom's people were from there.
Was it a musical household? Was there?
My mom played piano, and my dad liked music and had records, but so somewhat.
Yeah.
It was not... they didn't have parties and people came over and sang and we all jammed on the front porch or any of that kind of thing. It was not so much that, but yeah, I heard music my whole life. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a rich area, that's for sure.
What's that?
As far as like music history goes.
Well, more so in the mountains.
I guess so, but still, it's not far.
Yeah, but it's really weird. The mountain culture. Asheville back then. These days maybe a little quicker. It was like a 6-hour drive to get there.
Oh.
From the coast, it's like it's like two different states. You've got where I'm from. There's more of it's more of a coastal fishing, surfing, yo, man, what's up, me dude? You know, that kind of thing.
Was there a music scene there?
Not so much, a little bit, you know, but then, you know, the Asheville side of things, that's all Appalachian, which is folk music. You know what I mean? The music came there and it stayed, you know, that thing kind of stayed there. So we didn't have that down on our end. So not really, no. Okay. It was a little. You had to kind of go on a quest to find people.
So what was your trajectory as far as like getting into playing guitar? Was that your first instrument, or did you play?
Yeah, it was, man. I'm probably like you and a lot of people. As far back as I can remember, I was fascinated with it. I mean, you know, when you can't even. Well, maybe I'm sure it was after I'd begun to talk, but there was something about it. And I remember my parents getting me cheap plastic guitars and this and that, and they had bought me a guitar. We moved back. My dad was in the Army, and we moved back.
Oh, yeah. Is there a base there in Wilmington?
What's that?
Is there a base in Wilmington?
No. My dad got a discharge because he got sick.
Oh, okay.
And he wanted for my mom, to be near her family in case anything happened to him. And so we moved back near my grandmother. And there is a Marine base at Camp Lejeune, which is in Jacksonville. Okay. But not the Army base. The nearest Army base is in Fayetteville, which is Fort Bragg, which is where my dad ultimately, he passed away in hospital there. But they had bought me this guitar, I think maybe before we moved back. I can't remember. And I had a friend that took guitar lessons.
Yep.
And could play a little bit. And I vividly remember this, whether or not it's true, or, or just in my revisionist memory, that they came back from doing something one day, and they said, and I just have a visual of me standing on the steps and them pulling into the carport and saying, "We signed you up to take some guitar lessons where your friend Andy takes guitar lessons."
At a music shop or something.
Yeah, and it was called the Music Shop. And that was in Wilmington. See, so that's a 25-mile drive.
Okay.
To get there. The town I lived in, Burgaw, there was not
right.
Nothing like that there. So that's how that started. Yeah, and then I did that for 2 or 3 years. I can't really remember now.
What kind of guitar did you have at that point?
I think the first thing that I had maybe was like branded as a Decca guitar, which probably was bought at a PX somewhere, which, for people that don't know, is the department store that they have on Army bases.
Oh, okay.
You know, where things are you get a military discount. I used to buy records there after I got a little older. That didn't last long, and in fact, it lasted one lesson. And the guy that was teaching was like, he's not going to be able to learn on this.
It had just like horrific action, probably.
Yeah, and so I ended up with this Conn, C-O-N-N, the people that made the strobe tuners.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least they were the distributor or whatever. A gut string. A classical, which I still have. And so that was what I began to learn on.
So the lessons were your main source of information as far as learning goes?
Only source of information for the first couple of years. I can't really remember the time frame. I do remember this. At my first lesson, or maybe second lesson, I remember the first chord the guy taught me was the E chord.
A good one to start with.
Yeah, because you can just remove the first finger, and he was like, "There's
got a whole other chord."
And I remember riding in the car afterwards and hearing Rocky Mountain Way by Joe Walsh on the radio. And I remember thinking, that sounds like that chord that guy showed me. But of course I was like, but that can't be right. There's the distance between what I just learned and what I'm hearing on the radio is so far, there's no way that's connected.
Right.
But, and the funny thing is that I don't have a relative pitch or a particularly great ear, but there was something, I don't know, man, something in the spirit world, like my antenna was up and I heard that thing, and it spoke to me in a way that, like, these things are related. So,
what was your source of music? Like, just radio, pretty much?
Radio, yeah.
And were you buying records and stuff too?
Yeah, a little bit at that point. I hadn't really gotten into that.
Were you developing a taste for music?
Yeah, and it was all informed by what I was hearing on the radio.
Which was what?
Back then, which was awesome because
full on FM.
Specifically, remember AM.
AM, okay.
Station that we had in town, and I specifically remember because I don't think that we owned an FM radio. until like the mid 70s maybe or something. Or no, I shouldn't say that. I remember getting, when I was in 6th grade, a Panasonic stereo, which I still have at my house too, that has 2 dials on it that are round, that glow green, and the speakers are round. Like they look like the R2-D2 or something.
They're like globes at the speakers?
No, they're not completely round. You know what they look like is they look like, you know, those apartments, a parking deck in Chicago, that round building. They look like kind of like that, you know. But so I can, you know, you would hear, I've said this, you know, a lot. I don't be totally repeating myself, but it is true. You'd hear Al Green.
Yeah.
And then you'd hear Neil Young. Then you'd hear Yes. Then you'd hear Sly and the Family Stone. Then you'd hear Alice Cooper. Then you'd hear Cornelius Brothers and Sister Rose. And then you would hear America. And then you would hear, let's see, what would be some harder edge thing at the time.
Like Zeppelin or Sabbath.
Yeah, maybe Zeppelin, not Sabbath, but maybe a Zeppelin. But all those other things that I mentioned, they all had hit songs. It was all top 40. Roundabout was a top 40 hit song. Yeah. You know, it was on a single.
So was all that stuff speaking to you, or would you say you were like, were you tweaking out more over like the Al Green over the America, or were they just
I liked
everything?
all of it, and I still do.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know, now a little later on, when you become a teenager and you like start to get opinionated about things, you know, there's a lot of music from that period for me that I just, you know, I'm like, if I never hear this again, I really don't care.
Okay.
You know, but at the time, I liked all of it, and quite frankly, when you go down that list, it's all pretty good.
Yeah.
It's all pretty great.
Yeah.
I don't know. Here in Nashville, this is as a little aside. There's a radio station here that every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. You familiar with the Casey Kasem with the American Top 40?
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
They play an episode from the 70s every Sunday morning here now. Have been doing it for years. This past week was 1972. And it's corresponding. It's like August 13th or whatever, 1970, so 50 years ago. And I think the first 4 songs that he played, this is just a random week. You know, it was Saturday in the Park by Chicago and Take It Easy by the Eagles. Yeah. And I want to say like a Gladys Knight thing, but Midnight Train to Georgia was a little later.
It was the top 10 of that week.
But this was the bottom. This was 40, 39, 38, 30, you know, just the entry-level songs. And these bands are all new, and nobody had heard of, you know. And so it's really interesting to go back. So my taste was being informed by all of that. And every now and then something would leap out, and I would be like, I really like that. I'm going to save my money and go get that album.
And so were you learning specific songs or guitar bits?
It got to a point where I was able to begin to do that.
Okay.
You know.
Do you remember some of the first ones you would have learned to play?
Man, I can tell you the first guitar solo that I was ever taught, because I've been taught the pentatonic scale and major, minor pentatonic scale. Yeah. I'll digress. Some of the songs would have been some songs that I really didn't know. Like I remember for some reason, and I can understand now why that I learned this, was the song Traces by Dennis Yost in the Classics 4. I don't know if you ever heard that. It's really good.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of major 7 and dominant 7th chords in it. So the guy was trying to be like, here's a song, you know, and I'm like,
He's trying to show you some shit.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let's apply what I've been showing you. Yeah. You know, so it's not just mundane. But I'd never heard the song.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
you know what I mean. I can tell you, very first one. I can't believe it. Spaced on it. Very first one. Still love it. Summer Breeze by Seals and Cross.
Right.
The first song I ever learned how to play
on your nylon string.
On the nylon string, and you know what? It holds up. It's great. Yeah. I don't know. Louis Shelton produced it and played electric guitar on all that stuff, and it's a great song and a great recording. And so that is always brings me joy. Always.
It's pretty exciting when you first learn how to play a complete song.
Incredible. Yeah. You know, incredible, because that was one of the big things, was like, how long is it going to be before I can play a song? You know, and the guy was like, well, it might be 3 months, might be 12 weeks. You know, we'll get up these chords together, and you know, when you're 10,
you're impatient. You want to go.
Yeah. When you're 10, that's a whole summer.
So were you thinking at that point that you would want to get into electric guitar?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
And you were bugging your parents probably?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. And I ended up, but just to finish that thought, the first solo that I learned, quote unquote learned, I would wish I had a recording of my attempt at it, but I was shown was the China Grove.
Oh, the
Doobie
Doobies.
Brothers, which has that good Tom Johnston.
Sure.
Very simple but very effective thing.
Could you rock that sucker from top to bottom?
I can't remember. I could rock the first 4 bars of it or so. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm trying to think of if he veers. He does veer off into the minor scale. And there's a couple of things with the, with the 6 and the flat 7.
I can't remember that solo. I'm sure it's great.
I might have, run aground at that point. Yeah, and I did get an electric guitar from my guitar teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Who was a guy named, if I'm remembering this correctly, his name was Horace Pearsall. I'd been through 2 or 3 people because...
Same guy, same place. This is in
same
Wilmington.
place, but one guy moved to California. I had 2 young women that taught me that were both in high school at the time, and I think they graduated and they were like, "I'm out." This guy Horace, I remember, was really, really accomplished, and he had a Crown Les Paul copy, a black one, probably a bolt-on neck. I haven't seen the guitar in so many years. I sold it a long time ago, and a Marlboro amp.
Marlboro?
Yes,
okay.
Which was a solid state of, God knows who made it. Same people that made, I'm sure, a lots of other stuff. And my folks got that for me. I guess while I was still taking lessons at some point. And
did you have any buddies around?
Yeah, I had my one friend, Andy. And then after that, there was a guy in the next county, Ernie Johnson, who was a big mentor to me. And I just spoke with him last week. And he had a Les Paul. A real one, and that's a whole nother story. But he kind of took me under his wing and showed me a lot of stuff. This is a little bit after. I'm skipping some in there, but I can't really remember how we even met. Probably through like some church thing or something. That culture was really, really big.
Were you playing music in church at all?
No, my mom played piano in church.
Oh, she did. Okay.
Then when we moved, then we switched churches, and she did not. Again at that point, but yeah, there was a singing group maybe of some people that I was in junior high school with, and maybe they needed somebody to back them because remember this was in the sort of Godspell Jesus Christ Superstar in the wake of that.
Okay,
you know what I mean, like 5 years after that, but it was still lingering around, so
sure.
It was like
theatrical
contemporary Christian music or whatever you would call that at the time. So. I think I met Ernie through that, and he was really a special guy in a lot of ways because my dad was sick. He wasn't completely infirm, but he was kind of unable to do anything with me at some point.
Ernie was older than you, or around the same age?
Yeah, he was about 6 years older than me.
Okay.
So for a 21-year-old guy to spend his time with a 15-year-old is. When I was 21, the last thing I wanted to do was to spend time with a 15-year-old kid, And like I said, I could go on and on about that, but the impact is still being felt on me, And so he showed me, he was the guy that showed me, the 7 sharp 9,
Was he a pretty happening player?
Yeah, absolutely,
okay.
Yeah. But Steve, yet again, I've said this before, but it is contextually important. The town I lived in, we got a stoplight when I was 15. That's where we were at. You know what I mean? And we had no CBS. We had ABC and NBC. Because you grew up in Canada, right?
I did.
But you understand what I'm talking about by saying that.
For sure.
There was 2 other people in my county that played guitar, I think, and Ernie was in the next county. So it was very impactful in a lot of ways. But before that, I had begun somehow to figure some things out by ear, I think, and I think that it was the same old story. At some point, the guy came to my parents and was like, I can't, I've shown him all the stuff I know to show him. He's figuring it out on his own now.
Were you like dropping the needle
Absolutely.
And like figuring out licks? So you were at that stage.
Yeah, lots and lots and lots of that, for years and years after that.
Did you learn from books at all or tapes or anything? It was all just straight off off records?
And when people say that they're self-taught, I would say, obviously I'm not self-taught because I did have some lessons, but after that, my definition of that is I call myself a self-student because I was teaching a lot of things to myself, but I was also learning from other people. So I can't say that I taught me the things that they taught me, I taught myself.
Were you having any chances to see bands that were good coming, like cover bands or bigger bands or anything?
Not at that point. That happened later.
Okay.
Which was sort of the which was my portal into the music business, really. Before that, I just remember that in my lessons, and maybe it was just because I didn't want to absorb the information, but I wasn't taught like a theory, chord theory or scale theory. There was a lot of here's major 7 chord, here's dominant 7 chord. I don't remember being taught why they were called that and what the relationship, the intervals were.
Yeah.
So I had to figure all that out later. I shouldn't say had to figure all that. I'm still figuring some of it out, but I had to kind of get that into shape a little later down the road. And so, yeah, needle back. So books and things like that were, I would get the Guitar Player magazine and the columns that the guys would write. Back then it was before tablature, and I didn't read, and they would write the columns and talk about diminished chords,
like in Guitar Player magazine and stuff.
Yeah,
you would see stuff like that.
Yeah, and it was so foreign and so intimidating. Right. I was just like, well, this I have no idea what any of this.
Yeah.
I'll never be able to figure any of this out. That's where my head was.
Okay.
I learned all kind of off of records and then other people showing me stuff.
Was it just sort of across the board, those kind of artists that you were mentioning, or were there some like really hardcore heroes for you that?
Well, yeah, I got into the same thing that most guys around my age did that were into like rock. Mm-hmm. There was the Zeppelin records, a couple here and there. And I, here's another thing. I didn't have a lot of records because I didn't have enough money to go to buy them. It was they were a valuable commodity at the time. A lot of 45s and things, but it was the usual suspects. It was Led Zeppelin and
Clapton, Hendrix.
Yeah, I heard Hendrix, and when I first heard it, the first record I had of his was called Smash Hits, and I thought, man, this sounds like the old people music, because it had "Can You See Me Do Do," and all this stuff, and the way it was recorded, it sounded like 60s music, That rapidly changed. I got a Hendrix record called "In the West," which is probably not available now.
West. I have that. Is that a live record?
It's a live record that they claimed was recorded like at San Diego Sports Arena and stuff, but a bunch of it is from Royal Albert Hall, and somebody else owned the rights to the tapes, and they had to like do some kind of creative.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that record. I had that
record
too.
But it had the version that's in the Berkeley movie of him playing Johnny B. Good, and his version of Blue Suede Shoes, and some things. So I could kind of figure that out. I was like, oh, there's that thing that looks like the Red House chord, that dominant triad. I didn't know it was a dominant triad at the time, but so I got into that, and then a friend of mine, this guy I knew, started talking about some other records. Acts as Bold as Love, which he first mentioned it, I thought he said Acts as Bold as Love. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting title. But so I was like 17 years old before I ever heard that. But I heard, and I was like, oh, I'm starting to get this. When I heard Wait Until Tomorrow, I don't know if you know that song. But
of course, yeah.
When I heard that, I was like, I really like this.
Yeah.
So it was
That's interesting. So Smash Hits was your intro to Hendrix, and it kind of didn't resonate.
It kind of didn't resonate, because that's a lot for a 13, 14-year-old kid, that has already heard maybe even Aerosmith at that time.
Yeah, I get it.
So Usual Suspects, I was really into ZZ Top.
But were you figuring out some of the Billy Gibbons?
Trying.
Yeah.
Doing my best. Skinner, really into that big time, which was really good for me because, one guy played a Firebird, one guy played the Les Paul, one guy played the Strat. Well, that's what a Strat sounds like because they listed on the record who played what.
Right.
Phil's, Gary.
Did you have a favorite of the three guys?
No, not necessarily.
You just dug it all?
There's qualities about all of them, that what's that saying about the whole being greater than some of the parts? I always get that mixed up. But
I know what you mean.
So that was huge for me. I'm going to leave a bunch of stuff out, I know, if I don't.
What about, what's your relationship with blues like? Like, obviously, you've must have soaked some of that in at some point, but was that like a big thing ever? Did you listen to stuff and just be like, man, I got to figure out where this came from, and that led to Muddy, and then going back from there, leading to like
only later
Lennon Hopkins, and that was later.
Only later. I did not hear any. I would read about this stuff, and yet again, I was like, well, I never really heard it. I was just not that interested in it because I never heard it, and nobody I knew played blues. Nobody I knew had the records. So it took me, being in my mid-20s, before people started saying, hey, check this out.
Mm-hmm.
I met some people that were into it, you know, so then I had access to it. Because, you know, back then, like I said, records, I was not going to go buy a Muddy Waters album or a Buddy Guy album because I wanted to get the Marshall Tucker record because I heard the song. You know, and it was relatable to me, you know. That came later. Yeah, but then I did do that, absolutely, and still do it.
And what were your favorite? Like, which of those artists like really bonked you over the head?
Man, it's a cliche.
You quoted Jimmy Reed on the way into the bathroom.
Yeah. It's a cliche, but you know, just purely for the playing, well, and the singing ensemble play, all of it. That Live at the Regal record is something else.
It is something else.
Yeah. I love Freddie King's rock and roll stuff. You know, I just love the attitude and the intention.
Did you ever get into the acoustic stuff, Sun House?
Yeah,
Blind
to
Lemon
a
Jefferson,
degree,
that
and I'm
kind
a
of stuff?
really bad, like, I can play really bad John Hurt guitar, you know.
But you did kind of study some of that stuff at some point?
You know, which our buddy Alvin is a master of.
Yeah.
I don't think that's overstating that, do you,
Nope.
to say that he's a master?
No, I do.
Maybe as good as anybody alive.
I would agree.
At that.
Yeah.
At that style. So, yeah, you know, yeah. And I'm still learning, you know, like I never did a deep dive with Gary Davis, you know, and it has been like blows my mind.
It is mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting because like that music informed the music that you were informed by so much.
In
like,
such
so
a hard way.
deeply.
So when I started going back, I was like, oh, yeah, right. You know, this and that. Yeah, it's really weird, isn't it? Because you'll go back and hear that, and I'll be like, oh, I already know how to do that. I didn't know that's where that came from,
Right,
you know? And there's a lot of blues that I like. It's such a big umbrella, people talk about it, you know? But there's a lot that I like just from the fun. You know, I love that Hoodoo Man Blues record, that Buddy Guy Jr. Wells record, just because it's so raw and funky, man.
Yeah,
and
it is.
just so, like, Saturday night, dirt under your fingernail. You know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying.
And then, the second generation dudes, I really, really love Peter Green's guitar playing. And
I can hear that in your playing.
And I would say that I would call him a blues guitar player. I mean, even though a little bit later on, you know, they got into that Green Mountain Alicia and all the more rock and roll psychedelic stuff, the stuff that really knocks me out is
He was pretty straight up Chicago blues, man.
And man, there's a connection to the spirit world in his play and in his singing, I think.
Did you ever get a chance to see him?
No. Yeah, you know, I don't know if that answers the question at all. But
So what was your path to getting into bands that, like, you've talked about playing and taking lessons and your friend that taught you a bunch of stuff. So at what point did you meet the right people to, like, the first band I'm aware of is Cry of Love, which was probably a few years later. Quite
that
a
was
few years
later. Well, I
but-
went to college, right?
Okay.
At the University of North Carolina in Wilmington.
So do you mean you got through high school without ever playing in a band?
We kind of had a little band. No, we played a couple times in around town, but it was like no bass player. It was me and these two girls, Katie Moore and Jackie Bostick were their names. And it seems like they would switch between drums and guitar, but it was always two guitars and drums. And
That's cool.
And we played at the little dance and played Steve Miller, and I remember trying to play "Victim of Love" by the Eagles and Boogie. You know, it's funny when you do talk about the blues, the Chuck Berry thing. You heard that all the time in the 70s in different music, you know, like, and so a lot of that stuff that you hear on those blues records, yet again, you know, I kind of learned it somewhere else. You know, it was an interesting time because there was a lot of songs on the radio too that were like the 60s were 10, 12 years before. And so, you know, the first time I ever heard like Motown songs, it was cover versions of it. It was like Linda Ronstadt doing Heat Wave. I had no idea, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
Or the first time I heard like some Beatles songs, there was a cover that would become a hit again. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the you know.
Sure.
But the building blocks of like rock guitar, the language. I feel very fortunate that was all swirling at that time. You know. So yeah, Foghat, Fool for the City. You know, I mean, Lord knows what any of this sounded like. I don't have.
Were you still
of any of it.
Were you still playing that guitar through that solid state amp?
Yeah,
at that point? Okay,
and then at some point, my folks got me a Les Paul, a real one, which was a '77 custom. It was one of the 3-piece top, like natural finish ones.
Okay. What year? Like, was that a new guitar?
Yeah,
at that
it was a
point?
new guitar. It was bought from a place
Sweet.
called Sticks and Picks in Wilmington, North Carolina, with this guy named Eddie Bolin that ran the store, who I later ended up
Wow.
befriending and playing a little bit with. But
Do you still have that guitar?
still got stolen.
Oh shit.
But I wanted a PV Mace because that's what the Skinner used, and that's what the guys in Skinner used.
What's a mace?
Mace. It is a 200 watt. I think it's like 6L6s or something
Holy
like that.
shit.
And my buddy Ernie
Yeah.
was like, because they would advertise that in these magazines.
Yeah.
You know, they're PV powered or whatever. And my buddy Ernie was like, you might not want to do that. You know, let's look at these Marshalls. And so I ended up getting a 77 JMP with the controls in the top.
Yeah.
The combo.
Yeah, I
Which
know
I do
that.
still have.
Okay, you do. Eh?
I lost.
Wow.
It went away for a long time. I sold it to a friend of mine named Mark Bromeyer, and he, under the conditions in the '80s of, man, if you ever get rid of this, give me first dibs, and he sure did. Like 25 years later, he
Wicked.
was like, it's been recovered, and there's no speakers in it right now or anything. But the box is there, and the amp head is in there, and
Nice.
everything. So yeah, so I still got that. So I can't remember if the solid state amp was still on the scene. I will tell you this: the vocal mic was plugged into a stereo, a home stereo, because it had
Okay.
an input. I maybe so you could sing along like Mr. Microphone. I don't know.
Yeah,
But,
there's a reason that there was a mic input in some of those stereos.
yeah, I don't know, but it was a high impedance. You know, it was
Yeah.
not. So we did have all that. So yeah, man, I'm sure I'm leaving some things out. I'm trying to figure this all out chronologically the best way that I can. Taking care of business, just all these.
Some good Canadian rock
Yeah,
for
exactly, man. That's that.
I was here's a segue, but I was involved in, so Randy Bachman lived in Vancouver. He doesn't anymore, but he was there all through his career. And at some point in the early 90s, he like gathered all the guitar players he could from Vancouver and played Taking Care of Business for, I think it was 19 hours.
Was there? I think I
It's in the
remember
Guinness
I
Book
heard
of World
something
Records.
about that. Yeah, did you participate in that?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome, dude. So you are by proxy in the Guinness Book of World Records.
There's a picture of me in there.
Not even by proxy.
I'm
you're like
smaller than a
literally-
pinhead, but I'm in there.
There is really.
There's a picture of the people playing it.
That
Yeah,
is
it's
so
at the Vancouver
rad.
Art Gallery in like probably '93 or
That
something.
is so cool, man.
So, anyway,
I just like the fact that he set the goal and he achieved it.
oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
he's an achiever. That guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that kind of stuff. Yeah. So we would play at the little high school dance situation, or not even high. We weren't good enough to play at the high school dance. The local little quote unquote country club dance or whatever. And maybe at the street fair
Yeah.
or something. But there were a couple of bands that came and played at my high school at these high school dances. And I was always just so in awe. I was so enamored of the fact that, I was like, I can't believe these guys get to do this. you
Yeah.
know?
And so, hitting college, is that the point when you got a
I
band
met some
together?
other folks. I moved out of the house, and
What were you taking at college?
I have a history degree.
Oh, cool.
I have a bachelor's of history. I was taking the path of least resistance because it's the only subject that I was remotely interested in
Okay.
or good at. You
Yeah.
know? Although the people in the music department tried after my junior year, they tried to get me to switch majors and become a music major, and I was like, I got 1 year to go. If I do that, I'm gonna have to be here for 2 more years. I'm not doing it.
You want to get out of there.
Happen.
So you were sort of like on the path to become a history teacher or something.
Oh no, I was kind of on the meandering aimlessness path. Outside of the fact that I was just obsessed with this rock and roll music, right? So
Okay.
I met these dudes. We had a band.
Were you playing all the time? Like,
I was playing guitar all the time, and
Yeah.
we practiced. We did the classic thing of practicing all the time and very rarely ever gigging. And people would
That's
come,
important,
and people
man.
would come and go.
Yeah.
But a couple of these older guys took me under their wing, and it gave me a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, they're 24, 25.
were they some decent musicians?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, they
decent
were.
drummer. And,
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I mean, these kinds of things were in really short supply.
Mm-hmm.
So my ability to sort of discern, I could tell like not good from somebody who was adequate. I could tell that, but I'm not sure I could tell the difference between like can function on the instrument and really good.
Okay.
If that makes any sense, because I hadn't had any exposure to.
Interesting. Yeah, like you hadn't seen anyone.
Yeah, no,
good enough to like have those parameters in your mind.
Yeah,
yet. Okay, that's
everybody.
Cool.
I mean, when you're 15 and trying to learn how to play, everybody is awesome.
Right. I know that feeling too. Exactly.
I still feel that way.
Hey, we're in Nashville.
I'm still a fan. I really, really am.
Me too. What about seeing people? Like once you got to Wilmington, there must have been bands coming through there.
Yeah, so that's the key right there. Is that there was a club there called the Mad Monk, which got built while I was in college, and a guy named Charlie Maltsby, who just passed away a couple years ago, ran that place. He was really good to all of the local guys and the local bands. And what happened was there was a circuit. I don't know when you grew up, if this existed or not, but back in the 80s, there was a circuit of places for cover bands to play. And so this was a college situation. And so every Friday and Saturday night, these bands came through. And then, 2 months later, you could see them again. And so
this is just touring cover bands.
Touring cover bands every once in a while.
That really doesn't exist anymore.
No, does not exist at all. There would be like a national act every once in a while, and it would be, Cheap Trick or whoever.
Oh wow, okay.
Not
cool,
them.
Like cool stuff.
Not them in Wilmington so much, but the Romantics.
Okay.
Like
second or third tier.
Yeah, or new. Maybe they have one video on MTV type groups. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
These national acts. And so there was that sprinkled in with these other groups, and I would go see these bands, and I would just be like, man, these guys get to go and play every night.
Your mind's just
they get to travel and see things and meet girls and get paid and
sign me up.
This looks pretty awesome. And so.
But was it like just a complete stretch trying to figure out like how the hell do you actually do that?
I just took it a step at a time, man. I mean, I think that I had this pipe dream like I would love to do that. I have no idea how to go about doing it, but one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
And
the first step, you play with some friends.
Play with some friends. We had our band in town. Yeah. We played around. They knew some of these people. There was a couple of these bands that were on this circuit that were based in You get to meet those people. It's so some of the bands that came through every 2 months, when they come through the next 2 months later, maybe you introduce yourself, you meet the guy, you go, you hang out. They're in town for 2 days. You go, I'll take you to the beach tomorrow if you want to go. Eager young guys. And we would end up opening up for a couple of these things here and there. It kind of just unfolded, I guess, is the way to put it.
And did you get into that scene where you were traveling?
And so
what covers?
Ended up happening was I got out of college, graduated in the spring, and then in the fall of that year, I got a call from a guy that I knew that ran one band who really had his finger on the pulse of what was happening all around, and he said, hey, these guys in Atlanta are going to call you because they're looking for a guitar player, and I recommend you to be a guitar player. And and so I almost think of the club, the Mad Monk, as like a portal.
And you were probably getting pretty good at that point.
I was trying. I was working on it, But that was an issue for me too, was like, will I ever be good enough to do this, which
How were you with like learning repertoire? Like if you had to do a cover band that was playing like the top 40 or hits of the day or whatever, it's a lot of material to learn.
Yeah,
like,
I think back then.
That's for me, I've always felt like kind of good and also kind of bad at the same time that I never really played in cover bands. So like I would learn, I've learned parts of songs or maybe complete songs in my life, but I've never had to learn other people's songs. And
it is what it is. And, the thing about that I enjoy doing about when I do it now is that you get to pick the songs and play only things that you really enjoy. Personally, I really love that.
So were you doing like 3 sets a night?
3 sets a night, sometimes 4 sets a night, till.
That's how you get good, eh?
I guess that's, you at least your muscles and your chops.
Yeah.
And back then, I could retain all that material. I don't know if I could remember when you're talking about that much stuff and note for note guitar solos and all. And I would have to fudge things where there were like super shred guitar solo. I kept my right hand. I can't play that fast. I can't do it. So there'd be a lot of workarounds by hammer on and pull off stuff instead of and. But yeah, I would say that overall, it was you're playing. It's so second nature as far as like you're spending so many hours on the instrument that you don't ever pick the guitar up and think, man, I got to warm up.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
Do you remember a thing or two that you would have picked up at that point that was really integral to your mindset about how to play in a band? Like how to function as a guitar player in the band and like what your role was?
Well, it was defined for you by the material that you're playing when you're playing cover songs. You know what I mean? You didn't have to think about it. The parameter, what you had to do was already there, you know? And so the idea of what your role, how your role is going to maximize the song was not an issue because it's already given to you. That all came later.
Okay. What about writing? Had you started writing songs at that point?
Not to any great degree.
There was no, like, that was a completely cover band situation.
Right.
There was no originals.
Which is eventually why I quit doing it, because I was like, this is not...
You don't want to be doing this when you're 40.
And even beyond that, it wasn't even that I don't want to do this at 40. It was like between now and 40, I do want to try to do some other thing, if that makes any sense.
Did you see a path to doing that? Like, I don't know. Maybe you can tell me a bit about how Cry of Love formed, but did you see a path to playing original music?
Yeah, I think I did. Okay. And I thought the thing to do would be like, you know what? I'm literally making basically no money doing this. You know, the business model.
But the cover band money must have been half decent,
but not
it was
for
shitty.
The players. The business model was not based on financial success, put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of other factors that went into we've got to have the most PA and we got to have the most lights.
Because I know that scene in Canada was actually like pretty good.
You know what? And I look back now and go, oh, this could have been and probably was for certain people, quite lucrative. But, you know, you had to drag around your own PA system, your own light system, which means you got to rent a truck, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And driving all over the place, you know. There would have been a way. So looking back on that now, it's even more ridiculous because it's like I wasn't even getting paid. There was at one point an allotment in the first cover band that I was in where we just took $10 a day.
Holy shit.
And that's what we did.
Okay.
You know, and
that's not going to
make
you rich.
No, exactly. After a couple of years of that.
Yeah, that'll wear on you pretty quick.
Yeah, and, you know, the old saying of this is really isn't what I thought it was going to be or it's not cracked up to be. I thought, you know what? I want to go get a job. I'm tired of driving all over the place.
I got a history degree.
A week, you know. Yeah, that didn't even really factor into it because I was still very single-minded. You know, like it's kind of like that sort of naivety.
But music was you wanted to make your living playing music.
I never. It wasn't even a conscious thing, Steve. It was just like I just had to do it, you know. And I guess if I would have gotten to a place where it was like this is not going to pan out, I would have figured out something else to do and just played on the weekends, done whatever, you know. Which is there's no shame in that, you know. It's all about playing music. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to quit doing this. I was playing at that point. I'd gone from one band to another band, and the other band that I was playing in was like the biggest band on a certain part of that circuit, you know. And I was just over it for a number of reasons, and so that's what I did. And our bass player, Robert Kearns, who was in the band with me, I was
he was in the cover band with you?
Yeah, I was like, hey, man, you know, how do you feel about this kind of thing? And, you know, trying that, you know, maybe we could go get a job and get a band practice space. And we found our drummer, who I already knew, Jason Patterson, from another group that had been doing the same thing. And we all agreed, okay, let's do that. We'll get an apartment, as you do, move in together, you know, not the greatest idea in the world, but we got some good stories out of it that we laugh about today. And we'll go to work and we'll go to band practice at night and we'll figure this out and trigger.
What do you mean by to work? Like working at
I worked at a guitar store. Okay. Robert was a bellhop.
Okay. So you just had jobs.
You know,
yeah.
And then we'll go down to this band practice place and we'll try to figure this out. You know, we'll try to figure out how to write some songs.
And that was Cry of Love.
Do this, and that's how that came together. Yeah.
So how long was it before you guys were out gigging as an original band?
It took a little over a year.
That's substantial.
Yeah.
And how was the process of like figuring out how to write songs and stuff? Were you guys all doing it collaboratively?
A little bit, you know. At first, it kind of became more me later on.
Because the interesting thing to me about that band is like you guys had a lot of success. That was a successful band. And that was your first band.
Our first record, yeah. You know,
That's crazy, man.
The funny thing about it is, though, is I was 30 years old when that record came out.
Really?
Yeah. You know, so I had 4 years of college that put me 4 years behind.
Yeah.
You know, which is not a waste of time. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It was, you know, we were weathered veterans at that point, you know, and we just, I don't know, man, we just started throwing stuff against the wall and figuring it out as we went, you know, as far as like trying to put the songs together and all that, you know. It's very odd.
Were you demoing stuff, or was it not?
At first, yeah. Well, yeah, the whole time we were different methodology there, you know.
Tell me how you made that first record. Like, was that done independently, or did you sign a record deal?
We got a record deal.
Okay.
with
old school
with Columbia and
how did that happen?
Well, we used to work at this studio called Jag Studios, and the guy that ended up producing our record, John Custer, was the guy that had done demos for us. And we were finding our way stylistically, and we finally kind of landed on something that felt honest and felt like that things were sort of the body of work or the songs all seemed to work together. You know what I mean? Like I feel like sometimes when you're learning how to do that kind of thing, you kind of got to find your sound, quote unquote. And we kind of done that, and we were working on a demo, and the demo was not finished. I think we had some background vocals to put on. I don't know. It was not. I just had a rough mix of this thing, and this buddy of mine, Pepper Keenan, who was in a band called Corrosion of Conformity, who was a hardcore, like a metal hardcore band. They rehearsed next door to us.
Okay, cool.
And are
they from Wilmington?
They were. This is in Raleigh.
Oh, okay.
I had moved to Raleigh at this point, which was the big, you know,
the big town, big city.
There was a bit of a music scene there when I was a kid. But Wilmington at that point, you know, the interstate was not finished. You know, it was the music scene, the Raleigh thing. You know, you have the university, NC State, and Chapel Hill. There was a big thing going on over there, and which is where UNC is, and Duke and all the schools around there. So there were a lot of clubs, you know, and there was a scene. Something was happening there even in the 70s, but in Wilmington, not so much.
Okay.
It was all, when that cover band club opened, when Mad Monk opened, that was what we had. So I gave Pepper this tape. He was like, man, what you got? You got any new stuff you guys been working on? And I was like, yeah, but don't play this for anybody, man. It's not done, and we want to get it finished and do a real mix. Well, of course, he went to a party and met this guy who was a brand new A&R guy named Josh Sarbin, who was at Columbia. He had not signed anybody yet.
So he was chomping at the bit.
He was 23 years old, and
perfect.
And Pepper played him the thing, and he called up, like, you know, he told me, he goes, I played this thing for this guy at Columbia. He freaked out. I was like, dude, you did not do that. And so we got a call from him, and we were lucky enough to let some friends of ours jump on a gig that following weekend at the brewery at this club that we played at, you know, and he flew down and saw us that was on Saturday, and then they offered us a deal on Monday. And we now mind you,
what year is this?
This is like 1992.
92. Okay.
We had gotten rejection letters from lots of other labels.
So you had been sending stuff out. We had been
sending stuff out. I actually talked to a couple guys on the phone who were like, yeah, we like this part of it, but I'm not sure about this part of it. Or I love it, but my boss doesn't see, you know, that kind of. So, man, we worked really hard. That was my whole life. You know, at the time, I did what I had to do. I played in a little wedding band on the weekends with my friends, which was a great learning experience for me also, because I got schooled on a bunch of music that I didn't really know a lot about. But other than that, I mean, that's what I did. You know, was work. Let's try to make this thing work. What are we going to do? You know, no internet. That was a long way off, you know.
And getting a record deal was the path. Like that was the ultimate goal.
That was the thing,
right?
you know. And you had to have. I mean, think about this: you have to have a photo and a bio. You know, just getting that together with 4 knucklehead dudes is like a major accomplishment. You know, so there was a lot. You know. Plus, let's work on I'm trying to figure out how to write these. All my time at home.
Did you have an album's worth of shit at that point?
Oh, yeah. I would imagine before our record came out, we probably had 70 tunes or something
that you were
like
playing
that.
live and sort of.
Probably had played all of them at some point. I would say there's probably quite a few of those that got thrown out, like after the first time we played them or something. I don't know. You know, we had one lead singer, and then we got another lead singer, so it was like a complete different set of tunes, and like we're trying to find our sound.
Yeah.
And you know, that's what I thought about when I was at home, and ideas, driving around in my car and listening to the instrumental cassettes and all that. You know, it was pretty much all consuming.
Were you guys touring regionally, or
No,
were you?
we decided we weren't going to do that.
Oh wow, okay.
That we were just going to work on that part of it.
Stick to your jobs.
And we did buy a van at one point, and we would go down to Wilmington to play, and we would go up to Winston-Salem to the odd little gigs on the weekend.
That's as far as you
here and there, but we didn't do the thing
That's interesting. That's a different path.
Different path. Whereas like a band like Hootie and the Blowfish, which is from Columbia, South Carolina, that's how they did their thing, by just endlessly playing and touring. You know, different way of approaching things. You know.
So this guy comes down, sees you, signs you. Like that really happens, eh? Like in those
it really did happen. And you know, at that point, we had been together for 4 years, maybe. You know, and is that right? Let's see.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a long time.
Yeah, you know, and so it wasn't magic.
Right.
It was a lot of hard
grinding.
work, you know, and grinding and just grinding it out without a whole lot of carrots being dangled or a lot to show for it. You know, we enjoyed it, and we loved playing our songs and practicing our songs and working on the.
So
and, you know.
what happened after you got signed? Like did that basically entail giving you the money to make a record? I'm guessing?
That's what it
and
was.
Tour support?
Yeah, and we got tour support, and we, you know.
And then you had to get an agent?
All that came later.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, it was like, we'll give you X amount of money, and we were like, we want to be left alone, you know. And they did.
Amazing. Because this story happens with almost everyone I talk to. Except your story ends differently in that it was like super successful.
Well, yeah, you know, I'm not super successful, but
you had some hits. Like you guys did really well. Like this story usually ends with, and then that band disintegrated and the label fell apart
that all happened later.
Yeah,
you know.
But for a while there, like you guys, did that
absolutely.
Thing. It's impressive.
And it was a lot of hard work. So
what was the recording of that record? Was that like demos that became records, or did you go into the studio?
No, we went back and we went down to Muscle Shoals, Alabama.
Oh.
To the Muscle Shoals Sound, the second one that was on the river. Now it's back in the original Coffin Factory.
Oh, it moved for a while.
But it moved. Yeah, it was.
Why did you pick there? Just the historical importance of
we wanted to get out of town and go do it, which is kind of the opposite of now. I'm like, if I can stay home and do anything,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
You know. And so we took a road trip, our producer John and Kelly, our singer, and myself, and just drove around and looked at a bunch of places here and there that we thought might be, you know, so there probably, yet again, naivety and romance, you know.
Did you have a substantial budget to make the first record?
We made that record for what at the time was not much money, which was about $65,000. And, you know, this is when people...
That seems like a shit ton of money.
These days. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
We could, you know what? After we get wrapped this up, we could make 7 records.
No.
In fact, we could make, let's see, 6,000. How many? We could make 15 records for that money in here, in this room right here. But back then, you know, people were getting routinely, you know, $350,000, $500,000, you know.
Amazing.
And, but we didn't need it. We could play. Yeah. We didn't need a bunch of amenities.
So what was your schedule like? How long did it take to make that record?
We started that record. We worked for 5 weeks, and it was mixed and mastered.
All done in Muscle Shoals?
In Muscle Shoals, yeah. And it was mastered here, actually, at Georgetown Masters.
Okay. And then you turned it in, and was it like, thumbs up, this is cool?
Turned it in, thumbs up, this is cool.
Wow.
We didn't. The next record we got, that We Don't Hear a Single. We got that one on the next record. Yeah, and somehow in the you know, as the grunge thing, which I really hate to use that word, but as that
I know what you mean,
thing began to, it was really had fired up pretty heavy duty at that point, you know.
Where did you guys fall in the world of popular music?
Well, man, it was kind of an anomaly, you know, because our records were very dry. There was no, you know, outlandish snare drum volume and reverb and we didn't.
And you weren't a jam band, so you weren't in that scene.
No, we could
But you could hold your own in there.
Morphed into we did a little bit of that, but that was not part of we didn't come out of that world, you know. I don't know, we kind of, you know, there was us, and there was a band called the Screaming Cheetah Wheelies, which was from here, Mike Ferris's group, and there was a band from Birmingham called Brother Kane. There was a little more hard rock than we were, but my friend Damon Johnson had that band, and we were the bands that all got lumped together as far as this like sort of new Southern music or whatever. Sure.
Screaming Cheetah Wheelies was the same era, I guess, right? Early
Yeah,
90s.
yeah. Our records were all out concurrently, you know. We were not aware of either one of those bands until we started going out and touring and hearing about them and whatnot. But, you know, we didn't really sound like any of the bands.
Yeah,
Didn't really sound like
I've listened to that record. I listened to it yesterday just to refresh myself, and it's hard to put your finger on where
but that's kind of how we got lumped into the thing. So I don't know, man. You know, quite frankly, we just kind of did what we wanted to do and hope for the best.
And do you feel like they did they put a bunch of money into promotion and stuff?
I'm not sure about that. I don't really know.
We made videos though, and that's expensive.
We made a couple of videos. They were expensive. It was about a bit of a waste of money, really, honestly, because I don't think we ever got any real traction on MTV, which was the only reason to make one at the time.
Right.
But man,
but you did have traction on radio.
Yeah, and that's probably where the money got spent. You know, that's all. You know, that
was like a little payola maybe going
probably,
on in those days.
You know, I can't speak to that with any evidence, but that's kind of how that works.
Yep.
You know, how it worked at the time. And even if it's not money, you know, that just, man, we did so many trips to radio stations and so many free shows for radio stations, you know. And
God, that would be a grind.
And but you know, our songs got a lot of spins, went to #1 on the rock radio charts.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys were playing in Canada too. Like I remember hearing you on the radio.
Yeah, we went up there and did a grueling tour at the end of our first record cycle.
Canada, driving across Canada,
I remember doing 24 hours in the van one time. Like literally, it's the only time
From Toronto to Winnipeg, probably
done that. It was. I can't remember somewhere. I just remember we went through Thunder Bay on our way east.
Yeah,
we were coming from somewhere
like
to
Winnipeg
somewhere.
to Toronto. That's where you were going, man.
Yeah, probably.
That's
so,
a rough.
You know.
That's a rough drive.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that we got out and played with some of our heroes with open for Aerosmith and open for ZZ Top and open for Robert Plant. You know. Yet again, not in the biggest markets, that kind of thing. And there was only 3 or 4 shows. Did
you get a chance to meet like Billy Gibbons and Joe Perry and people like that at that point?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. It was not, I wasn't going over and sitting down with them at catering like, hey, what's happening?
Yeah,
but
Still,
it was a big thrill
big deal
at the time, because we're just literally 4 guys, like from rural North Carolina, and these people are not even like real human beings because when you grow up, I don't know what your situation was, but when there's no real infrastructure, if that's is that the right word? As far as like music business, like it's all on TV or in magazines, and when you're young and impressionable, it doesn't seem real or possible to participate in that.
Yeah, in Vancouver, where I grew up, there was some infrastructure because there was like network records around that time. And there was a real rock studio scene going on.
And was there like
that's where Aerosmith made the records,
right?
And Motley Crue made the records, and Bon
Bryan
Jovi.
Adams and all that.
Exactly.
And then before that, I guess Heart had done some stuff, right? Is that right?
Yeah, they worked at a studio that's still there. I don't know what the ending of Cry of Love was. Did you guys decide to disband? Or
man, we put that record out. We got home from that first tour cycle. We ended up parting ways with our singer. Took us a while to find another guy, new guy. Made that record, put the record out. It was pretty much extinct on arrival,
The second record.
Second record.
So that's where you really felt the whole like typical kind of bullshit about
and at this point too, you have to remember this is a few years later. This is like 4 years after our first record came out, and the landscape had changed so much.
That's a long time
at radio. This is when like AOR album rock stations were becoming classic rock because they kind of weren't playing any new. They'd quit playing new music. I don't really listen to that format anymore, but from what I understand, it's all just the war horses right? That, she's comfortably numb in Hotel California, right? I mean, but when we first, we kind of got in under the wire in '93 because they were still doing that at that point, so that happened. Yeah, that was 9 years worth. And after all that, I just remember that we were.
Did you ever make any money off that situation?
I made a little bit of money from spins, publishing money.
From writing.
Yeah.
But was the band, like, were you out playing successful shows and stuff, or did it not really translate to that?
We did at one point. We did okay in certain markets. Yeah, we could go from. By the third time on that tour that we came back, it was like, wow, we played to 30 people, and now there's 1,000 people here. That kind of thing. Not too many markets, but some.
Still, that's awesome.
Yeah, it cost us so much money. We never had a bus either. We did this whole thing in a van and a box truck.
And probably a lot of it was getting recouped to the label, right?
Like and we're taking tour support doing it as minimally as we can, and still you're not making money from that part of the thing. Mm-hmm. And so it was just a struggle, and it had been a struggle for a really long time with some high points in between. But before the high points, there was a lot of struggle, and
so you burnt out.
That's the best way to put it. Yeah, I never really thought about it in those terms before, but I burnt out. Mm-hmm. I had heard that the position, lead guitar player position in the Black Crowes was
so that overlapped like that.
Yeah, at the end of our band.
Okay, so had you met the Black Crow? Like, had you opened for the Black Crowes?
No, we hadn't opened for him, but I'd met him just minimally. I knew the bass player guy at the time, Johnny Colt, I knew him really not very well, but just a little bit from the a cover band days.
Oh, is he from North Carolina?
He's from Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
And the first cover band I was in was based out of Atlanta.
Okay.
So
you'd run into him.
Yeah, and one of their guitar techs used to work for my first cover band too. He was from Atlanta also.
Okay, so you had some connections.
Yeah,
in that world.
just kind of loose, but I knew that.
Did Cry of Love break up and you had no future to look forward to at that point, or were you like, oh, I could maybe do this?
I was thinking about that for sure. Yeah, no. But let's be very clear.
That must have felt like a bit of a stretch, though, too. Like,
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I was la la land also, But I want to be very clear in that was not the reason that I felt like I couldn't continue. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to shut the band down so I can go do this other. It was I was just fried. I didn't have anything else to give to it at the time. And
the other thing that I find interesting in your career is, like, basically, like, I know you've done original music since then, but essentially that's like the last project that I know of yours where you've really focused on doing original music. You've been a sideman almost exclusively ever since.
And I've written songs, I've had some decent success artistically, a little bit of popularity with some songs that I've co-written with people.
So was becoming a sideman, was that something that you had your sights set on?
I kind of figured that out at that point. I was like, you know what? And and it jumps off the page when I see other people say this now, or when I hear them in interviews, it jumps out of the speaker. I hear a lot of other people say the same thing. Man, I want to let somebody else worry about all that other stuff, and I just want to go play,
Yeah.
And
that's how I felt playing with JT and Ali all of a sudden, because I'd always just done my own stuff, and then suddenly it was like, I didn't even know where I was going half the time.
Right, exactly, in the van. Because you don't have to. I still don't. Seriously, probably less now than ever.
So what was the Black Crowes process like? Was that an audition thing?
It was an audition.
Oh,
yes, yeah? And we had some mutual friends, and yeah, that's what that was.
So they just made that record.
They hadn't. I think they hadn't even made it yet.
Oh, okay.
I think that they.
This is
97.
Okay.
I think they had come off a tour.
So you still hadn't met them.
Split. No.
Except for...
Not really.
Okay.
I'd been, like I said, on a periphery.
So the call just came out of the blue, or you were kind of working it?
A couple of friends, I came home from our Cry of Love, our little aborted tour that we did on our second record, and I remember I was at a coffee shop, and a guy came up to me in the parking lot. One of my friends came up to me in the parking lot that I saw there, and he was like, hey, man, those guys from Crows are going to call you, because they were asking around about if we knew anybody that could do this gig. And so, unbeknownst to me, that had already been set in motion.
Oh, okay.
And then their record that they were making, they had just, Rick Rubin had just done a deal with Columbia, Def Jam. Our band was on Columbia, so our A&R guy was able to put in a word for me too, just to get me the audition. Nothing's going to happen if you don't go, if it doesn't click musically, you know. So
you go down for an audition in Atlanta?
In Atlanta, yep, sure did.
What was the audition like?
I drove down there in my little 1992 Nissan pickup truck, and they had given me 9 songs to learn. We got through 8 of them, and it was on a Friday. And I remember them going, "Okay, that's cool." And Steve, the drummer, was like, "Yeah, man, if you get on the road now, you can probably get back home. You can probably beat some of this traffic, you know, because it's a 7 hour drive back." And I was like, "Are they telling? Did this go good or did this not go good?" Like they're like,
was there any indication?
They're like, "Get out!" No, those dudes are, man, close to the vest, poker face, man.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, either this went really well and they don't need to hear anymore.
It's kind of awkward, right? It's like hard to, man, like
auditioning sucks, man. Yeah. I've never had to do it a couple of times, but it's terrible for everybody.
Did you feel like for you it was like, I gotta nail it? Or were you just like, meh, whatever, like if I get it, I get it?
No. I'm still that way. You know, if you're going to be a professional, you got to be a professional. No. I worked really hard on this stuff. I worked really hard on it.
So you showed up, you knew the tunes.
I showed up and knew the stuff. You know, it's the kind of thing where, like, if you do your best and something gets sideways, you just got to know you did your best. Don't you think? I
totally.
mean, you know. And so, no, I didn't.
So Chris and Rich were there.
Chris wasn't even there.
He wasn't there?
No.
Oh, so how were you getting
I'm
through
not
the
sure
songs?
the keyboard player, Ed, was there either.
Oh, okay.
It might have just been me and Steve and Rich and the new bass player, Sven. I can't remember.
And Steve had already been in the band for a while at that point?
Steve
Gorman.
Him, the brothers, yeah.
Okay. And so what happened?
Well, I played the songs and they said, leave early.
Yeah. And then you got the gig? Like what?
And well, then I got a call back.
Okay.
And then that turned into, well, we're not sure what we're going to do. And so then they split and went and made the record.
Oh.
And this went on for months. And I was kind of like, well, this probably is not going to happen, but I'm going to just see.
So what'd you do?
You know,
like, what were you doing at that time?
At that point, man,
how were you surviving?
I started writing some other tunes.
Yeah.
I think I had saved up a little bit of that publishing money. I mean, I'm very capable of living on not very, on not very much. And so
you don't have kids or anything, do you?
No.
Okay, so you were a lone wolf. Out
Yeah,
there.
my wife was living. This was before we got married, but she was living with me at the time. And man, God knows my rent was. I mean, it was.
You were living in.
I was in Raleigh.
Raleigh
at
still.
this
Okay.
point, yeah. To clear that up, after I left Wilmington, I went to Atlanta and joined this cover band. Then I moved back to Wilmington, stayed in that cover band, which was then based in North Carolina. And then when I joined the other cover band, it was based in Raleigh, and that's what got me to Raleigh. So now Barney had gone to the big city and where the music scene was.
But it was probably like super cheap rent or whatever.
Yeah, and there was a lot more happening there than there was down in Wilmington. So yeah, all that.
So you didn't go back to playing in cover bands or anything like that?
No, okay. I didn't.
Did you feel like there was going to be a call coming, or did you just think like...
I did.
You did, okay.
And I would hear from people that had hung out with those guys, oh, they mentioned you, that kind of thing. And I wouldn't have been as patient if I wouldn't have been such a big fan. It was all...
You just thought this was going to be a badass gig.
It wasn't about I'm going to go make a bunch of money, and it wasn't about I'm going to get to be famous and be on a magazine or whatever. It was like, I really like this music a lot, and I feel like that it's carries a lot of emotional weight, and so then the following spring, there was hey, can you...
So how many months
This
later?
is, man, probably 6 months.
Holy shit.
Something. They went and made
They really left you hanging.
They went and made the By Your Side record.
Okay.
And then they needed the touring player. At this point, I've never done a sideman gig.
Right.
I have no way to say, hey, I'm not going to wait around, or you guys are going to do, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I couldn't pull any cards like that.
And you didn't have any other, nobody else was knocking on your door at that point?
Not at that point, no.
Right.
Not that I can remember. I'm trying to remember, there was some talk of forming another band with some other friends of mine, and this and that. And I did set to work working on music, writing songs and stuff. But
so in their trajectory, they'd made this new record.
so they made the record after I auditioned,
Right.
But Rich played all the guitar on. So now they're going to
go on tour and they need somebody.
And they need somebody. So I went back and played with Chris for the first time. And after the first day of us playing through the stuff,
How was that? Like, how was the hang and the, like, did you guys hit it off okay? And
yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a lot of powerful personalities, and a lot of energy swirling around.
Brothers, man, I can't.
And it was and it was heavy. It was a level of operating that I had never been around.
Tell me a bit about that. Like, what I would imagine the touring is on some crazy level as far.
Well,
as...
that was all new to me also. I was like, wow, this is hotels.
Buses, nice hotels,
all
probably.
That, all that. So I went down and played, and after the first day, they were like, well, we could go on tour right now. And I was like, well, I didn't show up to blow it.
Yeah.
And I didn't say that to them directly, so.
So was this similar to what you talked about with the Dixie Chicks, where they're just like, we need a year of your time, or was this like a totally different thing?
No, this was totally different.
What was the ask of you for the Black Crowes? Like, was there a specific time?
No, I mean, really wasn't thinking about it in terms of that. I just figured, well, I'm signed on. Here I am.
Okay.
Away we go.
Yeah.
Because that's how rock and roll bands.
Yeah, man.
Work. Now,
did you feel like you were in the band?
On some levels and on some levels not. I probably.
So what levels not? I guess just like in artistic.
Yeah,
license
and you're not profit sharing or anything. I mean, there's principals, and then the other guys are on contract players.
Who are the principals? Just the brothers, or
you'd have to. I don't know.
Okay.
You'd obviously both of them,
but they're equally calling the shots in that situation.
Yeah, it's a very
hard
odd.
to say.
It's a very odd dynamic.
Okay.
But
I don't know anything about their. I mean, I know that they often don't get along. That's like
I shouldn't say an odd dynamic, but it was it's brothers, it's family, and it's their band. So even though you are playing as a contract guy, business wise, and you don't really write songs, and you don't have any say so as far as any decisions that are being made and all that, so you kind of are effectively a sideman. But it's like you're sort of in the band, but not really.
Yeah,
but
it's sort of a weird spot to be in.
It's an unusual, a thing. But I tell you what, there's a whole lot more that goes on than you would realize with these rock quote unquote bands.
Yeah.
But it's kind of got to be that way. If you've got 6 dudes that are all trying to raise their hand and we should do, that doesn't go very far either.
Yeah.
And they had a very, very successful formula, business wise and first and foremost musically, that was working. So at the time, even if I couldn't understand it, I can understand it now.
How busy were they?
Very.
So it was like nonstop.
It was a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you get put on retainer in a situation like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just you're there again. Your calendar is just off limits for everybody else, and you're just at
like,
their beck and call.
Yeah. There's how
much advance do you get in
that situation? There was a lot.
Like a year.
So not that much, but you would know. If hey, we're going to take September off, then you're pretty safe to do whatever.
And they'd stick to that generally.
But I was coming from the rock band world, man, so I wasn't thinking about like pimping it out to how then we got some downtime, I'm going to try to go over here and do this. I was like, okay, well that's what I'm doing. That kind of thing. So that's how that worked.
And then that led to recording the next record, Lions, right?
I played on a little bit of that. That's was a bit of a closed shop. Yeah, but
who produced that record?
Don Was produced it.
Right.
But that
and played bass on it too, right?
Maybe. I got to be honest with you. I know my friend Andy Hess, I think, played some bass, and Rich played some bass. Don might have played some bass on it. I don't know. I was only there for a few days while they were.
So how did that work with you? Like, you knew they were making a record. That's sort of a weird dynamic
it's
too,
very
right?
Because
you're
you're
sort of in the band, and did you feel a little left out of this?
Absolutely. I wouldn't as much now, I don't think, because I kind of understand.
Yep.
I've been around a little longer, and I kind of understand. But things happen for a reason, and the water always finds its level. And we had the Jimmy Page experience in between.
Oh, I gotta ask you about that.
Which was an incredible thing that.
Oh, so that happened
before Lions.
Okay.
Right.
So tell me about the Lions session then. So you just showed up to wherever
It was in New York. It was down just south of Houston Street in an old Yiddish theater down there. In fact, a song that I co-wrote with Warren Haynes that he put on the Government Mule Deep End record, which was a record, their original bass player, Alan Woody, passed away, and they did 2 records with all
different bass
guest bass players, and a song we co-wrote, we cut in the same place.
Cool.
That Larry Graham played bass on.
Really?
From Sliding Family Stone. Yeah, it was a trip. Yeah, it was awesome. But that was maybe after the Crows thing. I will say that I went in and was there for a couple days, 2 or 3 days, I guess.
You went in knowing that you were only going to play on a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't know how much I was going to play on, but I knew that they were already doing their thing, And, fair enough, that's, yet again, these things happen way more than you would think that they would happen. As far as that kind of thing. They had to do what they had to do to get the record done the way they wanted to get it done at the time.
How was Don Was to work with?
Don was awesome. And I'm not going to say we hit it off because I didn't spend a lot of time around him at the time, but I went in and did the best I could do, which I think was pretty good job,
I really like that record. I mean, I know it sort of it's kind of
kooky.
It's not up there in their canon of albums or whatever, but I think it's a cool record.
Yeah. I haven't listened to it, dude, in decades. I would have to go back, but I wouldn't be surprised if with some objectivity,
a little
without the
distance
emotional attachment that I would have had at the time, But all that to say is that years later, I ended up working a lot for Don.
Oh, you did?
Doing these house band things where he's a band leader. In fact, that last waltz thing that I was telling you about, Don was a band leader on that the COVID.
And that all stems back to that session.
I think that what happened was this, that in 2014, there was a Greg Allman tribute thing that was happening at the Fox in Atlanta, and they were putting the band together for that, and Warren recommended me to Don, I think, to play guitar in the band. Warren was not in the band. He was going to be there, but as an artist. And lo and behold, Don was like, oh, I know that guy. He came in and did,
rocked it on the Black Crowes record.
On the Black Crowes record. So the point of that is this, Steve, going back to the doing your best, is if I would have let my dissatisfaction with not being included at the time affect my attitude and my professionalism, and if I would have showed up and been like, okay, guys, whatever, and kind of like not kind of half-assed my way through it because my feelings were hurt, I might not have ever, after that recommendation, Don might have been like, yeah, I'll work with that guy. It was not too, you see what I'm saying?
Totally.
So however many years later.
That's cool, man.
You never can tell.
Yeah.
So kids, always do your best.
And is that when did they kind of implode at that point right after that record?
No.
Or did you guys tour
we
that
toured
record?
it. Yeah.
You did?
And then at the end
and then it they went on hiatus for a while.
Went away. Yeah.
Okay. And then that was the end of the gig.
Well, I went out and played. I co-wrote a couple songs and recorded a little bit on Chris's second solo record called New Earth Mud.
Yeah.
We went out and played. We had a really good time playing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great band. And at the end of that, he asked me to come. They were going to put the band back together, and he asked me to come back. At that point in time, I didn't think it was the right thing for me to do, and so I just declined the invitation.
Can you just tell me about the Jimmy Page thing? I can't fucking believe that. That's just that. It honestly seems like kind of a bad idea in a way. Like it's.
Now, that's interesting. Why do you say that?
I guess because, at that point, Jimmy Page was a little unpredictable. My understanding is that Chris wasn't much of a Zeppelin fan. I don't know. It just seems like a weird, potentially, there could be a lot to go wrong with that situation.
Oh, I think anytime you combine forces with, when you take people that have their own artistic bent, regardless of the level of success, and put those things together, that there's potential for some weird things to happen. And when you add into that global domination, however you want to put it.
So whose idea was this?
Man, well, I think that, I can't speak to, I'll be the first one to tell you there was a whole lot that happened at the time that I just was not privy to, or I'm not going to say blocked out, but just was oblivious.
It was above your pay grade.
It was above
my,
and I was just kind of oblivious, you know. No, I wasn't. I was paying attention to other things.
So did it just come up one day, like, oh, we're going to do this thing with Jimmy Page?
We're going to back up Jimmy Page at a charity event at a club in London.
It was a one-off.
And it was a one-off.
Okay.
And I think that it went well. And after it went well, someone had an idea. I have no idea who.
Okay, so, but that event, like,
right.
Jimmy Page walks in the room.
Well, we rehearsed the day before.
So what's that all about?
And I had about, I'll tell you what happened. I had about a month to do some prep work.
Yeah.
Which, yet again, you know, I'm
Paid
not going to
off.
show up at the rehearsal and be like, I don't know, you know.
But the idea being you're going to play Zeppelin tunes? Or
Zeppelin tunes. And
strictly?
maybe a couple of Crows tunes and maybe a couple of covers. I can't remember. Maybe like Shake Your Moneymaker or something. I can't remember. But mostly Zeppelin tunes. And so we...
God, I would be terrified.
Well, we'll get to that. So I had about a month to do the prep work and to think about this, to let this stew in my head, you know. And so we do the rehearsal, it goes well, and we're like, yeah, we do the breakdown from Whole Lot of Love in the middle of this jam and morning song, and Jimmy goes, well, let me hear how you play it. And he pulls up in a couch right in front of me.
Oh, my God.
You know, and we're like, bump, dump, you know, I have to play his thing with him sitting right in front of me. So, okay, I'm processing, whatever, as the kids say, I'm processing it. I think it went well. We had dinner that night. He came to dinner, and it was pretty awesome because I don't know if you've seen that movie, It Might Get Loud,
yeah.
But where he's talking about Rumble, the Link Ray song.
He's got that glint in his eye.
He did the same thing at dinner that night, like he was 15 years old or 12 years old, you know, like, you got to listen to Link Ray, you know.
Crying, talking about Link Ray, basically.
Such a fan. It was so inspiring.
Yeah.
You know. So then the next day we go to play at Wembley Stadium. But this is not with him. This is like Lenny Kravitz, Aerosmith, some kind of festival situation or whatever. And so we go and we do the gig, and we're going to hang out. And there's going to be, you know.
Do you hang out with Jimmy Page?
No,
is that a thing? I
don't think he came.
Okay.
He wasn't there. But we were going to hang out at the thing because we knew the guys in Lenny's band. We played with I knew a couple of the guys at Aerosmith marginally, you know. I think Brian May was there that day just hanging out, you know, as they do at these things. Man, we got off stage. 20 minutes later, I was like, I got to go back to my hotel room. I'm like having not a full panic attack, but an exhaustion, anxiety. Like I got the stadium gig out of the way. We just rehearsed with Jimmy Page last night. I got to play with him tomorrow night. And I just had to go back to my room.
Probably the best call you ever
and
made.
Just sit there at like 5 o'clock. I was like, what am I doing? You know, I should be at the thing that dreams are made of, you know. But so when you say terrifying, yeah, it was terrifying. But not terrifying enough to shut me down. Put it that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that.
So how do you reckon playing alongside Jimmy Page? Like, how does that work? He's not really known for playing live with other guitarists, really.
Right.
But in the studio, he's got like 19 guitar parts on.
So yet again, when we decided we're going to do this tour, I just did as much homework as I could do, got a hold of as many bootlegs, called my friends that I knew had bootlegs.
Try to figure out like what he
played, what he did live.
Right.
And I will say that I kind of MD'd the guitar section. Not for him, but just for all of us.
Yeah.
Like by anticipating, okay, I think he's going to play so-and-so, so why don't we play this, or you play this, or
between
you play
you
that.
and Chris.
Between me and Rich.
Or Rich,
right,
I mean, yeah.
You know, and the keyboard player, Ed, too, also.
Okay. Yeah.
And
so you guys prepped on your own.
Prepped on our own, and we had a couple days, maybe a day before he showed up, or a couple days before we showed up, and I tried to convey that the best I could. You know, I think this is what we need to do, and here's the harmonies here, and he showed up, and I've seen interviews with him this year where he talked about they really knew their stuff. Cool. It was easy, you know. Yeah. Yet again,
kids.
You know, and that's not really about you. That's about him and his music. You need to respect that and not show up and be a chump.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, we put it all together.
How was he playing wise at that point? Like he's gone through some real like low points.
This was not a low point.
Okay, he had
and
his
also
shit together.
I remember specifically on nights we'd be playing and we'd be in the middle of Lemon Song or something, and he would be doing his thing, and it was that thing. I'm sure you've had these experiences where your head whips around.
Yeah, but I've not had that experience, and Jimmy Page is standing.
But I'm saying with you know how You're like, there's that sound.
Yeah.
Like
I've had that with like David Hidalgo.
Right. Exactly.
But it's not Jimmy Page.
Right. Well, he's his own Jimmy Page.
Yeah. Nothing against David Hidalgo. But
No. I'm saying David Hidalgo, who possibly my favorite electric guitar player.
I'm right with you.
I shouldn't say favorite. One of my biggest inspirations for a guy that I haven't really stolen much from, like literally
I
taken
know
from.
exactly what you mean.
But I go to that well all the time. That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just whip around. There's that sound.
Jesus.
And so we worked on it. There's a lot of good stories, too many to tell. I just remember one, we were in Chicago, and this was for the second leg. My memory is bad.
So was it that gig went so well that it was like, hey, let's do a tour? Okay.
And so the first tour, quote unquote, where that live record came from, but I think it was only about 5 or 6 shows. We played like in Boston and in New York 3 nights, and then we went to LA and played at the Greek.
Which is where the record was done.
And then I think it was the next year we were going to do more.
Okay.
And we were in Chicago doing not pre-production, but doing production rehearsals at this old theater there. And Jimmy says, now during 10 Years Gone, he says, the other harmony, because we nailed all that down the first thing. He goes, there's another couple of guitars in there. Do you think that we could have Ed, the keyboard player, play that? And I said, yeah. I said, honestly, Jimmy, I asked him to do that on the last go round, and he just never, for whatever reason, never did that. And he goes, let's go in here and see what they are. And so we go into the dressing room where there's a stereo. I sit down on the floor, and he stands behind me while I'm turning the balance knob, trying to figure out his guitar part.
It's like you're 12 years old again.
It's like 12 years old, except everything's going, trying to concentrate to do that.
That's bananas.
Yeah, it was pretty bananas. And, I had dude, if you come over to my house, in my basement studio, I framed it in a terrible Hobby Lobby frame. The Circus Magazine poster from '77 tour that I got, it's on my wall now because it was on my wall when I was a kid.
I probably had it on my wall.
And so, there's a lot to be said about that. I don't want to go on and on and on about it. Did you get some good hangs in with him, like on the bus and stuff? Little bit, not on but no, he flew. We didn't do that, but we went to the music store together.
You did?
And a little of this and a little of that. And he was very, very nice to me, very respectful.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
man, what an experience.
It's I'm still putting it together that it happened, like literally. You know what I mean?
How long was that tour? Like a couple months? Or something?
Man, it was only I can't. We did some, and then we took a break, and then we did a couple of other dates, and then he split and had some back trouble or something. I'm not sure, but the rest of it got aborted. We were supposed to do a bunch more, and it got canceled. Yeah.
That's so crazy. God. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, we could talk all day, but let's kind of wrap this up a little bit with, so now you're in Sheryl Crow's band. You've been doing that for a good chunk of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a real band. Like when I don't think we'd met yet, but I saw you guys, because I was playing the Festival d'été up in Quebec City, and you guys were headlining.
Yeah. Boy, there was a lot of people at that thing. I don't remember most gigs, but I just remember that was the most elaborate catering tent I've ever been in my life. Do you remember that?
Well, you had a different catering tent than I did.
I was like, dude, what is going on? It's just like,
It was you guys and Brad Paisley.
Right.
And here's what I remember is like Brad Paisley's massive and, sort of at the height of his career at this point, but it felt very like Nashville-y to me. There was like, it was very orchestrated and everything was perfect and in its place. But when you guys played, it felt like a kick-ass rock band, and it didn't feel like that at all to me. It was like the tones were more up my alley, and it was just like you guys were playing like a greasy rock band, and it felt great.
Yeah, it feels good to do that. Mm-hmm. The band is really good.
Yeah.
And
because she had sort of like, she lives in Nashville, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she had sort of like LA guys probably playing with her, I guess, through most of her career up to that point.
No, I think just different folks from all over.
But she wanted from what Fred told me, she sort of wanted people that were more around the Nashville kind of area.
I think logistically.
Yeah, logistically. Yeah.
Quite frankly, it's cost less money. You know what I mean? And
so was that another call that just sort of came out of the blue, or was that?
So a little bit, Peter Stroud, her guitar player, the MD of the group.
He's still there, right?
Yeah, he has been taking a hiatus because of some family health things that he needs to take care of, which are the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, I had been friends with him, and we had actually made a little EP with a thing called, with a group called Big Hat, which was Peter and myself and Robert Kearns on bass and Fred on drums and Ike Stubblefield on keys and Keith Gaddis. And so we had done some writing and some recording, and I'm not really sure about the pure genesis of the thing. I think that she had some shows booked and they needed a group. She didn't have, her band was not intact at that point because they had taken some.
Did you know her at this point?
I maybe met her, maybe.
You hadn't played with her though?
No, I don't think so. Her manager was a friend of mine from the Crows days. I don't think I had played with her.
Her manager is the Black Crowes manager?
No. He was from the Crows days. He used to come around.
I see. Okay.
And so I knew him a little bit. And I knew Peter, and so Peter said, "Hey, well, let's try these guys. You know, let me bring my guys in."
So it was you, Jen, Fred.
Well, this is before Jen, but the guys that were in the Big Hat band were me and Robert and
not Keith
and Peter, not Keith, and Fred, and and we just played.
And neither you or Fred had like a solid gig at that point.
Man, we had just come off of.
That seems far-fetched.
No, well, we had come off of making this Courtyard Hounds. We did 2 records with the girls from the Dixie Chicks, the sisters, that Jim Scott produced, and we had done some touring with them, and then there was a Dixie Chicks tour in 2010 that we did. That was a bunch of dates opening for the Eagles. So that was 2010. Did we start this thing up in 2010 or 11? It was right, sort of dovetailed at the end of that, the best I can remember. Don't hold me to that.
I won't.
I think because the Courtyard Hounds record came out and we could not tour it because we had taken this other. The cards fell where they fell, and
was there an audition?
I guess it kind of was just to see if we sounded good as a band, you know.
And I'm gonna guess you showed up prepared.
Showed up prepared. Yes.
She's got quite a body of work.
And yet again, a lot of really great songs. You know, there's a couple of those records I really, really like.
Yeah.
I mean, I like all of them, but there's a couple that I had been a fan of pre all this.
Yeah.
You know. So. It wasn't an audition as in, you know, you come in at 6 and then the next guy's going to come in at the, you know, that's how, well, the Crows one wasn't like that. That was just me on that day. I auditioned for Peter Frampton's band, and that was maybe a couple of guys a day, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's how that came about. Before, that was right after the Chicks.
Yeah.
I think if it was an audition, it was more like, let's go out and play the shows, and we'll see how it goes.
See how it feels. Yeah.
And it just, things just happen. You know, you get a certain kind of group of people together, and it just makes a sound. And either the intentions are good, and it makes a good, honest sound that fits the artist.
Did you have any inclination that would be a 10-year gig for you?
No.
Like, that's by far the longest gig you've had.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, I did not, you know.
And are you off the books for everything else when you work with her as well?
No.
Does she say, "Oh, we'll do these 3 months at
well,
this
yeah,
point"?
we kind of know in advance, and then what happens is if there's anything that we're, like anything that I'm doing now, if it's something that I feel like I can't cancel, I'll let them know. Hey, I'm not going to be available these days. We don't have anything booked, you know.
But she's basically your number one priority.
Yeah. I mean, if it was, you know, if it's just if it's something that I feel like, well, I could cancel that, you know, or I could skip out, or they'll find somebody else or whatever.
But things like that, like her organization doesn't spring shit on you with like a week's notice, do
Sometimes
they do? Like maybe a late night thing.
But it's not her. It's not her organization. It just happens if the opportunity comes up for something.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe for like a promo, a TV thing, or a private show here or there, whatnot. But you know, it's not really an issue.
And was it a totally natural gig for you? Was it a struggle at all to find your place in that music, or not really?
No, not really.
I mean, it seems like it would just fit you like a glove.
It kind of does, and the key is for me, to try to honor the tunes while doing it your way. You know, if that makes it. Yeah, and when I say doing it my way, I honor the tunes as filtered through the way I feel like they need to be honored, and just listen and don't play too much.
Right. That's important.
That's for me. I'm just speaking for me.
Are you guys playing through amps on stage in that? Mm-hmm. So that's more of an old school approach. Are you on in-ears?
Isn't that funny that you have to say that that's an old school? Yeah, we are on ears. Yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay. Yeah. But you've got amps on stage.
It's pretty low volume situation. We got the plexiglass and all that, but we do have amps on stage. Yeah.
So in this whole career of yours, which has been like really interesting and intriguing, has there been a point since, like, say, the Black Crowes thing finished? Has there ever been a point where you've been like, shit, man, what am I going to do now? Like, it seems like you've kind of gone from one thing to the next.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky as far as that goes. Especially for a guy who doesn't do a lot of hustling, And when I say that, I mean I'm just not good. I'm just kind of lazy.
I understand.
I'm kind of lazy and just not really that guy. I mean, I know
seems to have served you just fine.
Well, I know how to put myself in a position to be on the radar for something I feel like would be a good fit.
Yeah.
I know how to do that.
Has there ever been a year where you didn't work and you're like, shit, man?
Yeah, I'm sure maybe. My mother, I lost my stepdad in 2009, and my mom got really sick too, and I went to live with her for that summer. And so there wasn't a lot happening, but we made that Courtyard Records Hound the Courtyard Hounds record right after that. So yeah, there have been. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There have been times, and there are times now, where, you look at the calendar. But man, honestly, there's always something to do. You can take that and do all kinds of creative things when you don't have something where you don't have to be somewhere. You know what I mean?
Has your guitar collection grown in the last 10 years at all?
It's probably stayed the same because I probably liquidated when it has grown. But yeah, I've gotten a few.
What's your main axe anyway? I often see you playing an SG. Is that?
I like that.
Is that one of your main ones?
And depending on the situation, I got a 65 SG Junior that I really like a lot. P90. I'm a big P90 fan. That guitar is really cool for certain things. It's dark, because it doesn't have a maple top. People think that SGs are twangy sometimes, but sometimes to me the Les Pauls have even more top end than the SGs do, depending on the one. But
you play a Tele quite a bit too.
But I really like the Telecaster. I've got to have one particular Jeff Sin Telecaster that's one of my favorite guitars. Yeah, the SG with the P90s. I've got a couple Collings guitars. Electrics that are the hollow body ones.
Oh yeah, you like
with
those,
the P90s. Yeah, that I really like. I've got one in particular that I use on the Sheryl gig. That's it's like what they call an I-35, but it has P90s instead of humbuckers.
That's
but it's
cool.
like the I-30 neck. They had to do something with the neck angle in order to. It's like a hybrid of those
to fit them in.
And has trapeze tailpiece, very old school feeling. They do a little relicking on it, and so for an over-engineered guitar, it doesn't feel like an over-engineered guitar or sound like it to me. So,
what kind of amps do you use these days? With Sheryl?
Man, I've got this little 15-watt matchless Lightning that I've been using on and off for years and years.
Do you guys backline with that band?
Only if we have to. We usually take our stuff.
Okay.
So that's my main amp. Now, when I'm
just
recording,
one 15-watt matchless.
Well, I've got a little 210 Drip Edge Vibrolux reissue one that I use for the more Fender, like neck pickup telly Fender.
One or the other?
One or the other.
So you've got an amp switcher that you just have
and I don't use both of them. Now, when I'm at home, I'm recording. I was just doing something a couple days ago for someone. I got an old 64 AC30.
Nice.
And I just got this.
That can pump out the wattage.
Yeah, I just got this 50-watt silver front Selmer bass and treble 50. It's really great, and I've gone to the dark side, and I just they go straight into the aux, and I use the speaker simulator from the aux.
I've got one of those too.
And
it's pretty cool, actually, isn't it?
Works great. I'm downstairs in a non-soundproof room.
Yeah.
And so I can use headphones if I have to. Once I get my tones dialed in through the monitors, I can put the headphones on and don't disturb anybody. I've got a couple of go-to things. It's funny how the aux, like the AC30, sounds best through the Vox AC30 cabinet sim with the silver bells and the same speakers that are in the amp. It really does
makes sense. Yeah,
do that. But I'll mix and match some things sometimes. Like the other day, I was using the Selmer, but I was using it through Tweed Deluxe style cabinet, but with a vintage 30 model in it.
Okay.
And for some reason, I don't know, I was just like, it sort of sounded good.
In the aux, you mean?
In the aux,
okay,
yeah. That thing with the...
It's kind of endless. Like
Selmer. So I've got a bunch of amps and stuff that I use at home for recording, and but I really like that sound. I like the...
You don't use the aux on the road at all?
No, unless we're playing a tiny place. I have one that I can use, and I'll just use
Okay.
it for attenuation.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like as far as this, it's, man, I have a hard time. I know it sounds good probably, but just not having a cabinet is a hard thing for me to wrap my head around for live, you know. It's necessity at my house. Plus the workflow thing
I know, right?
is so much quicker because I don't have to, like, I could plug in the mic, go in the other room, mic it up, come back in, listen, go back, put it on the tape, quote unquote, listen, go back, move the mic, turn the treble up on the amp, come back, listen, you know, you can do it all right there. It's been a bit of a godsend. And, you know, quite frankly, I've been playing on like records that big time engineers engineer and stuff, and they all like that. They seem to like the sounds.
Man,
you know?
yeah, they nailed it with that thing. Have you tried the Strymon Iridium?
No, a friend of mine has one though. I heard it's really good too.
It's pretty wicked.
Yeah, I bet.
It's not as versatile, but it's actually simpler in a lot of ways.
I like the less versatile personally, just because it's simpler.
I mean, it's like a Deluxe or a Princeton or a Marshall, I think. I can't remember.
And a Vox. There's a Vox.
And a
in
Vox,
it, too.
yeah.
And the thing about that is that then you could quit worrying about backline.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just get me a speaker.
Yeah.
You know, to monitor through. Yeah. So I use those. I've got an old blackface Showman that I use sometimes. That's fun.
Cool. Yeah.
And I got a matchless DC-30, which is a no-brainer. Like you
That's the matchless version of an AC-30.
It's hard to make it sound bad. It's hard to do that. But I enjoy the old AC-30 too.
I bet. Well, I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about gear. I don't usually talk much gear on this show.
Yeah, I'm not really that guy either so much either. I begin to glaze over when the
we got it in there though.
Yeah, when the, what do they call that? The phase inverter, when that gets into the conversation, I'm out, man. I don't know. I probably should know way more about that than I do. But.
Yeah, I stopped caring a while ago too. I mean, I care. I
you
love working on it myself, but I don't really talk about it that much anymore.
Well, and you know, you go back to, I mean,
Bill Frisell calls them bicycle seat sniffers, people that are really obsessed with gear.
And the people like all my heroes probably didn't even know what kind of tubes were in their amps,
course
much
not.
less what the phase inverter was. You know what I mean? All the way up to today, when you see Hidalgo play with whatever janked out rental backline and some Boss pedals, and you're like, if I could sound half that
I did a
good.
gig with him, and he showed up with a Boss pedal and a rented Strat and a backline amp, and he sounded like fucking David Hidalgo.
That's what I'm saying. If I'm just like, see, so it kind of neuters a lot of that discussion to me.
Totally.
Yeah, it really, really does.
Yeah.
But that also might be just because I'm not that interested. So, you know.
Yep. Well, thanks, man.
Hey, my pleasure,
This
man.
has been really cool talking to you, and you got a really interesting history, man. It's really cool.
Thank you very much, man. Yeah, I'm a very, very, very fortunate guy.
You worked your ass off.
Still very fortunate. A lot of people do. I've been very fortunate in that I feel like that I have been able to, for the most part, not in every situation, but a very, very high percentage of situations, played music that meant something to me.
Yeah.
And
that's incredible.
That's the barometer. I think that the idealistic version of me that was formed, like the rock and roll music, and when I say rock and roll, I say even things with a rock and roll ethos. It might be 6 Days on the Road, whatever. You know what I'm saying? These things that I feel like I'm part of this, or if that makes any sense. It's a bit of a lazy way to put it, but that's how I put it. Like this rock and roll, you know, it encompasses all kinds of music.
Totally.
But I think that the idea that it meant something to me has always stayed with me, and so that's why I feel really, really fortunate in that I feel like that I can that I have been able to play music that did speak to me and does mean something. You know,
Absolutely.
It's something that you can believe in.
All right. Thanks, man.
Cool. We good?
Yeah, we're great. Thank you so much for listening. That was my conversation with Audley Freed. Had a blast speaking with him and having him over here at the Hen House, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. We shall see you in a couple more weeks for another chilling episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. We'll see you then. Over and out. Music Makers and Soul Shakers is produced at the Hen House Studio in Nashville, Tennessee by Steve Dawson. Please remember to subscribe to the show and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
You can find more info on this episode, including show notes and an audio playlist at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Thanks again to our amazing sponsors this season, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, Isotope, and Spectra 1964. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.